To remain updated with the latest business news, click on the bell icon.
How will demand get restored, for example, in the aviation sector? Because almost in parallel at the time when the budget was being presented, there's been a near 10% increase in ATF, and ATF is, being treated like a cash cow. Is that fair to the aviation industry, for example?
Let me give you a different perspective on ATF. The taxation on ATF is lower than that on diesel. So ATF is not, all petroleum products are taxed at particular levels. And international oil prices, India imports most of its oil. We cannot insulate any industry from the impact of imported oil prices.
So, Sir, pardon me for interrupting you. Then why are the people being insulated from the price build-up? For the last 85 days, OMCs have not raised prices. Why has the daily price movement been suddenly sacrificed, as some people call it, at the altar of political expediency?
I'm sorry, that you'd have to ask the Petroleum Secretary.
Okay, fair point, fair point. But you were making a point about passing on the burden equitably in the fuel prices.
No, what I'm saying is when you say that airfares have gone up, they have gone up because international fuel prices have gone up.
Okay. From a budgetary point of view, how much of a risk have you factored in? Because there are assumptions. Crude oil is at 90. Is there some expectation about how oil is likely to impact the projections for the next financial year?
Oil prices don't directly enter into budget calculations because we don't have any item that is directly related to the oil price. Our excise duties are specific duties. They are not ad valorem duties. So oil price does not directly figure in the budget numbers. Its indirect impact would arise through inflation, what inflation does for various prices, what it does for dearness allowance, things like that.
Which was my next question on consumption. If consumption is going to kickstart, obviously inflation rides along with it. What's your view on how inflation is likely to pan out in the next 4 to 6 quarters?
Again, I think I must start by telling you in a lighter vein that I am yet to meet any economist or analyst who has been successful in predicting even 1 quarter ahead.
Yes.
So I am much less knowledgeable than them. So my predictions are going to be much worse. But what I will say is that we have the tools at hand with which to manage the various international contingencies that may hit us on inflation. So there are possibilities. In fact, currently we have a problem with elevated commodity prices, not just crude oil. It also affects our fertilizer bill.
Absolutely.
It affects a number of other...
In the current financial year.
That's right. So those risks are there, but I think we have the ability to handle them.
That's why you have kind of been conservative. You have prepared the markets and under-promised on certain things, including revenue buoyancy, for example?
Under-promising, not really. I think we have been conservative in estimation. There is a difference between deliberately, underestimating and estimating at a conservative level.
Okay.
So we have taken conservative estimates. We have anticipated not the most optimistic scenario. We've taken something which we consider a more realistic scenario, given the different risks that are prevalent.
Which is very credible because the maths of the budget is ultimately tested. Just one point. Is the cleanup of the economy that began several years ago, and it's not just a budgetary exercise, I'm asking you a broader question, is that over? There were many poison pills scattered around and they kept popping up. Is that now behind us?
I think to a very large extent it is behind us.
Dr. Somanathan, Air India has been cleaned up. And I will also ask you about some social sector spending priorities, but the question is, why is Bharat Sanchar still being fed?
Last year, the government announced a public sector enterprise policy. This policy, if you like, was an inversion of the 1950s commanding heights public sector policy, because it said that the government would divide the public sector into 2 categories, strategic and non-strategic. The policy stated that in the strategic sectors, the government would continue to have a presence, but with a minimum number of public undertakings. And in the non-strategic sectors, the government would vacate those sectors by eventually privatizing all the public enterprises in those sectors. Telecommunications is a strategic sector. It is therefore, it is the policy of the government that there will always be one public sector undertaking in the telecommunications sector. So this is not one where the eventual goal is privatization. The eventual goal here is a minimal presence. That minimal presence exists for 2 reasons. One, to protect consumers so that if there are monopolistic or non-competitive tendencies in an industry, you have at least one alternative which is not subject to that. And secondly, there are issues of reach to remote areas, to villages. It is not as if our private sector has actually reached there are many parts of India where the only the signal that you'll get is BSNL.
Absolutely.
So BSNL will continue into the future.
That's a good point that you make, sir, and you're absolutely right that the private sector has not reached there. But why isn't Bharat Broadband able to meet many of the targets? And they've been, outlined year upon year.
That's an issue of execution, and
Okay.
I'm sure the government will improve upon that this year. Substantial provisions have been made and course corrections have been done, and I think it is on course to complete its targets this year. Whatever they have for this year, I think they will do.
I also want to request you to take our viewers through the philosophy of the cleanup, and those are my words, as far as social sector spending is concerned, including some of the numbers which have been kept at lower levels than the enhanced spending. The question I'm asking you is, NREGA, for example, beyond the numbers, there have been reports, perhaps you're aware of that, about substantial leakages in a particular state or two. Have you had occasion to look through it? Is it a matter of concern? Is there a change in strategy needed?
The leakages in NREGA are a matter of serious concern, and we have taken cognizance of those reports, and subsequent anecdotal accounts from other states indicate that those reports are not peculiar to one state, and in fact are more widespread. So yes, that is one area of attention which I'm sure the Ministry of Rural Development will be looking at very carefully in terms of tightening systems and making sure that what is spent reaches those whom it is intended to reach. That's one area. In terms of budget provisioning, we have provided the same level as last year's budget. It is a demand-driven scheme, and we remain committed to funding it as the demand arises. But it is our expectation that with large increases in spending on other programs, including the PM Gram Sadak Yojana,
Yes.
where we had a huge step up this year, 27% increase. We've also made provision for meeting part of the state's share of PM Gram Sadak Yojana. So it's our expectation that with the pandemic receding, with no major lockdowns, with limited restrictions, without the kind of out-migration that you saw from big cities 2 years ago, it is unlikely that there will be a major surge in NREGA demand compared to the last 2 years.
Take our viewers through the Jal Shakti allocation, but not just the allocation. What's your own sense about how it is panning out on the ground and the outcomes from previous allocations?
So for the Jal Jeevan mission specifically, which is a tap in every house, the allocation this year 60,000 crores, the highest ever, and they expect to complete 3.8 crore tap connections. They've made substantial progress in the last 2 years, but the biggest years in terms of outputs are this year and next year. So I think they are on course to get the job done.
If you like the video, do like, comment, share and subscribe.